Hi friends, the Gen X topic has received a lot of focus lately. The reason is that that generation is starting to retire and there are some things that are coming out that a lot of them didn't realize. This video discusses what's been hiding in plain sight, and a lot of it actually just came out in a report called The Forgotten Generation. It's one that details a lot of the stuff that Gen Xers are starting to experience. The report was written by the National Institute of Retirement Security, and if you're interested in reading it, stick around to the end and I'll tell you how to get it. Let's start off with a question. That question is, who's responsible for the financial security of a retiree? Well, in this day and age, the answer is obviously the retiree. But if you went back in time, 20, 30, 40 years in time, the previous generation, the boomer generation, had access to something that Gen X does not have. And that is a defined payment plan, a defined pension plan. That wasn't always the case, of course, but if you worked for a big company like GM or Ford or one of the other big manufacturing companies of the day, one of the draws to have someone work there was that you offered them a generous pension plan and lifetime health benefits. Of course, if you ran your own business or you were a server at the local diner, well, they didn't generally offer defined benefit plans. But the belief at the time for these blue chip companies was that the employer was best suited to take care of the financial well-being of the employee during their work life and in retirement. Completely different than what you're experiencing today. And by the way, pension plans were themselves relatively new, and employers weren't too worried about being able to cover these costs because, first of all, the markets were going up. Second of all, longevity was somewhat limited post-retirement. And the third thing was that if the numbers didn't work, they just simply raised the expected return. And for whatever reason, many of the actuaries back in the day were okay with this. Of course, we all know how the story ends. Many companies went bankrupt because of this. This was one of the reasons, one of the many reasons, of course, but one of the reasons that GM went bankrupt. But here's the problem. What was expected to be the solution to companies going bankrupt was the 401k plan that came about in 1978. And by 1981, 401ks started to become part of the corporate landscape in terms of benefits. By the year 2000, 3/4 of all pension plans, or retirement plans anyway, were 401k plans. Most of those people that were on the old style pension plan at the company were grandfathered in. They got to keep their pension. The new employees coming into the workforce had to go with the new 401k. And guess who the next generation coming online was? That was Gen X. These were people that were born between 1965 and 1980, and they started working between 1985 and 2000 at the height of the conversion to the 401k. They were the first generation to have to make a decision about whether they were going to participate in this new plan or not. And their model was their parents, frankly, who had a defined benefit plan. So their parents didn't pay into a pension plan. Why should they? There are still segments of the country that participate in a defined benefit plan, by the way. They're usually government or some form of public service, like a teacher, a police officer, or military. But the vast, vast majority of people now are 401k participants, if they participate at all. The reason I give you this context is because there are a lot of people, you see it in the comments section here on YouTube, who are quite aggressive to individuals that didn't save enough for retirement. John Doe should have known better, and now he's in a bad situation, so he's on his own. That may be true. In fact, it is true. They are responsible for taking care of themselves, despite the fact that they didn't have the perfect model to emulate. But if you look at the next generation, they are a generation of people that are saving more. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. But if you told John Doe or Jane Doe, if you gave them the information then that they have today and gave them 25 years of growth on their retirement savings, a lot of that problem would go away. But unfortunately, we can't go back in time. So what do the numbers look like for Gen X approaching retirement? Well, for a lot of them, a very large portion of them, the numbers are devastating. As you can imagine, given the information that we just talked about, only 14% of Gen X is covered by a defined benefit plan. That means that 86% is covered by a 401k type of plan, if they're covered at all. If you look at the averages of Gen X, the average Gen X has $130,000 in their 401k plan. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but it isn't, and it's actually quite misleading. Here's why. If you took a group of 10 people and you said, I want to know how much each of you has in your 401k, and one person has 1.3 million and 9 people have zero, the average is $130,000. And 9 out of 10 of them have zero. So while the average is 130,000, the median, the point exactly in the middle, is zero. And 90% of the population will have no money in retirement, despite the fact that the average is $130,000. Now, this is an example, but let's talk about the real numbers because the data is directionally correct. In the real numbers, if you take the population of Gen X as a whole, the mean is still $130,000. Now, if you look at the data on everything from healthcare to costs in retirement, no one can really live on $130,000. But putting that aside for a second, the median, the point right in the middle of that entire population, is $10,000. And 40% of that population has zero saved for retirement. Now, the big question here is, do they know that they're behind? Well, the answer is it's complicated. Yes, they do, but no, they don't. If you look at the data in this report, 86% of men and 87% of women know that they're less than half of where they should be at this point in their lives. Yet, despite this acknowledgement, many experience what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a psychological effect that basically means that while they know the information, they don't know the information. They think that they're going to catch up, and they won't really discover that they can't catch up until the very end. And just for completeness, if you look at this data for individuals who are married men have $25,000 as their median number, and married women have about $15,000. So more than the $10,000 median number for the entire population, but certainly nowhere near where they need to be. And divorced men, $216, and divorced women, $1,480. You get the point. Now that's retirement savings, but when you factor in net worth, which includes things like your home, it doesn't look much better. If you look at older Gen Xers, those that were at the beginning of the cycle, so those born in 1965 to 1970, when the global financial crisis hit, also called the Great Recession, in 2009, they had a net worth of $80,000. That immediately dropped to $40,000 within a year or two. And it wasn't until 2020 or 2021 that that same group, much older now, had a net worth of $80,000 again. The younger end of the spectrum, those that were born between 1975 and 1980, saw their net worth go from $15,000 down to $12,000 during the global financial crisis, but it has 3x'd since then. They're up to $45,000 on average. Still not a lot for retirement, but certainly much better when your point-in-time funds go from $15,000 to $45,000 than when they go from $80,000 to $80,000. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that a very large portion of Gen X is going to be reliant on Social Security. Now, despite all of its shortcomings, Social Security is quite a wonderful thing. It's indexed to inflation, it's backed by the full faith of the federal government, and it provides income for a lifetime. But it's designed to be a safety net, not to put an individual in the lap of luxury when they go into retirement. To live well, someone needs substantial savings and investments in addition to Social Security or a pension plan, like we talked about before. And of course, there's the risk, and it's a big risk that there will be adjustments made to Social Security that affect Generation X. Now, I'm not suggesting that there won't be Social Security or that it will be depleted and they'll have to rely on a much smaller number. However, what I am suggesting is that it's possible that a certain segment of Gen X will have to change the way that they receive Social Security. Now, let me take you back in time to 1983 and explain exactly what I'm talking about. In 1983, the Social Security Trust was months away from running out of funds. It was very much at the tail end of what we're all worried about today. Now, despite all the noise about what could happen in 2035, let's call it, there are really only one or two things that the government needs to do. One is to raise the Social Security tax by 1%. Frankly, that would probably do it. Or the other is to raise full retirement age from 67 to 68. And that's exactly what happened in 1983. They did both. At the time, lawmakers raised full retirement age from 66 to 67, but they grandfathered anyone who was age 30 and above at that point in time because it would be too devastating on them to plan for that extra year. So if you were in your 20s or earlier, then you saw your full retirement age gradually move up to 67. It depended on when the year you were born, but 67 was the ultimate stopping point. So if you're Gen X, you're probably asking, what does this mean for me? Well, the one thing that's probable is that any tweaks around the benefits probably won't apply to you, any negative tweaks anyway, simply because if you use the past as the model, those issues will be pushed down to the 20-something-year-olds, not the 40-something-year-olds. The other side, though, is that if they do raise the tax on Social Security even 1% and you're still working, that probably will apply to you. But the overall thrust of the video is that if you're above these averages, the mean or the median, keep working, because that doesn't mean that you're in great shape. It just means that you're better than the next guy or woman. But if those numbers really represent where you are today, know that what you have on your side is a bit of time, but not much. And it's important to start contributing aggressively to your retirement plan. In either case, remember that more money in retirement isn't a bad thing. And if you overshoot the mark and you have too much money in retirement, well, I'm sure you can figure out what to do with it. If you like this video, check out that video on why baby boomers are in financial trouble. Also, as I promised, in the description, I've included a link to this report from the National Institute on Retirement Security. Please note, I have no affiliation to them whatsoever. It's a free report that they provide to you. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.